It is not the sound of the kennel door slamming shut that startles me anymore. Not any longer. What terrifies me now is the silence. A full, cushioned silence, smelling of wood, laundry soap, and, subtly, the strong coffee scent that the humans love. What frightens me is the absence of the odor of disinfectant and cold metal of Kennel 7, because the smell of abandonment, however dreadful, was familiar. This smell of home, this one is new and dangerous. It is the smell of a promise. The front gate closed. For the first time in my life, I didn't hear the sound of a padlock. Instead, I heard the sound of a soft lock, the click of a security I never knew existed. The humaness, she didn't have a name for me yet, she was just the woman with the sad eyes, held my leash, and the human, the silent man, opened the door. And then the scent hit me, a wall of odors that were the evidence of a life I had never had. The smell of my first home was the smell of fear and disillusionment, covered by his perfume. The smell of the shelter was anguish, but the smell of this house, it was the smell of history, a story that had been interrupted, and it was palpable. I stepped into the living room. The floor was smooth and warm. Sunlight poured through the window, drawing golden squares on the floor. It was beautiful. It was calm, and it was his. The smell of Max. He was everywhere. It wasn't a bad or old scent, it was a scent of life, of constant presence. But now it was diluted, like an essential oil that had been spilled but the wind hadn't carried away. It was on the curtains, in the corner of the sofa, on the cushion, and stronger than anywhere else, it was on that thick, plush, cream-colored rug in the center of the room. I stopped. My body stiffened and the euphoria of being rescued evaporated. My first life lesson, learned in those cold days, was that the world is made up of territories, and that rug, that square of happiness, was his territory. I looked at the humaness. She was kneeling, her hand extended, inviting me to move forward. But I couldn't. Moving toward the rug was an act of desecration. It was saying, I am here to take your place. And I didn't want to take anyone's place. I just wanted a place beside it. I, Goldie, who had a golden heart, was paralyzed by the fear of a ghost. I felt like a usurper, an unwelcome replacement that the family had taken just to fill the void left by the perfect dog who had passed. That silence, which was once comfort, was now oppressive. It was the whole house screaming Max's name. I took a step back, my tail tucked tightly between my legs, and it was in that moment that the human, the silent one, did the first thing that connected me to him. He didn't scold me, he didn't pull me, he just knelt down, to my height, and looked at me, not at my eyes, but at my paws, and he said a single word, hoarse, as if he hadn't used it for a long time. He said, peace. I don't know what that meant, but the tone was one of permission. He didn't tell me to go to the rug, he told me to be at peace. I circled the rug as if it were a sacred lake, and I curled up in the farthest corner near the glass door that led to a backyard. The backyard, that would be the next frontier. The first chapter of a love story is not always a fairy tale. Sometimes it's just a silent negotiation with the scent of longing. The corner near the glass door was my refuge. It was cold, but it smelled less of him. The sunlight here wasn't warm. It felt like a spotlight on my vulnerability. I watched the humans move around their new space. They unpacked bags, placing items on shelves, rectangles and squares that had no meaning for me. Everything was new, ordered, and terrifyingly permanent. And I, the dog from Kennel 7, was a messy variable in their perfect equation. The humaness, whom I was beginning to call Mom in the silent language of my heart, started the slow, patient ritual of the first day. She brought a bowl of water, then a bowl of food. Both were placed on a protective mat, strategically far from the sacred rug. I drank the water in nervous, quick gulps, my ears constantly twitching, waiting for a noise, a sign of disapproval. But the food, I couldn't touch it. I had been conditioned to eat fast, to hoard, to fear losing my portion to a larger, hungrier dog. Here, the food was just sitting there. It felt like a trap. The humanist stood back, giving me space, but her eyes never left me. They were those deep, dark eyes from the shelter, full of that painful recognition. I could smell her anxiety, layered beneath the lavender soap. She wanted me to eat. She wanted this day to be perfect. And I, Goldie, felt paralyzed by the weight of her expectation. It's a strange thing, this human need to fill emptiness. They try to fill it with silence, with order, with a new dog. But emptiness is not a physical space. It's a feeling. And Max's emptiness, that specific, loyal, heart-shaped void, was demanding to be acknowledged before I could claim my own presence. I didn't move towards the food. I just stared at the forbidden rug. It wasn't a matter of appetite. It was a matter of respect. If I ate with too much comfort, too much joy, would I be insulting Max's memory? Would I be saying, your suffering is over and now mine is? It felt like a moral dilemma woven into the fibers of the cream-colored carpet. Suddenly, the silent human, Dad, I supposed by the way he positioned his body protectively between her and the outside world, came back into the room. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the rug. And he did something profoundly unexpected. He walked right to the center of the rug and lay down. Just lay down, flat on his back, eyes closed. He looked massive, a mountain of grief and silence. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was this a challenge? A ritual of mourning? Was he connecting with Max in that spot, trying to make the scent stronger, warning me away? The sheer vulnerability of his position, a dominant human, exposed and still, was shocking. He was not inviting me to join him. He was just existing in his sorrow. The humaness, Mom, didn't seem surprised. She simply knelt beside him, near his head, and began to read aloud from a small, soft-covered book she had been holding. The sound of her voice, low and gentle, wasn't directed at me, or even entirely at him. It was directed at the space. It was a lullaby for the past. I didn't understand the words, but the sound was a balm. It was the sound of commitment. I was starting to understand this home wasn't defined by walls or food, but by the relentless, quiet work of healing. And I, in my corner, was just watching the performance of a love that was too big to die. Max was no longer a threat. He was a standard. They loved him so deeply that if they could choose to love me even a fraction of that, I would be safe forever. If this silent language of Goldie's heart is reaching yours, if you're finding comfort in this new beginning, please give this video a golden like and comment below. What is the deepest act of loyalty you've ever witnessed? Your support helps me realize that I am not alone in my need for a safe space, and it helps spread Max's message of enduring love. The sight of the human, Dad, lying still on the rug and the sound of the humaness reading her quiet, soothing words was both comforting and confusing. It was an intimacy I hadn't earned, a vulnerability they were sharing not with me, but with the memory that occupied the room. I felt like an outsider, watching a play I desperately wanted to join. Hours passed in this strange, ritualistic silence. The golden squares of sun on the floor shifted, elongating, then retreating. My stomach was empty, a nervous knot of hunger and fear. I was used to hunger. Hunger was predictable. But refusing food here, in this place of plenty, felt like the only act of control I had left. It was my way of saying, I am grateful, but I am not yours yet. I am not ready to trust that this abundance is permanent. The humans eventually rose. Dad didn't immediately move the food bowl. Instead, he went to a shelf and returned with a single worn tennis ball. It was old, faded, and slightly deflated. He dropped it, not near me, but right on the edge of the sacred rug. It was a gesture of invitation,
but one wrapped in a silent condition. Join the play, but respect the boundary. I lowered my head, staring at the ball. The familiar instinct to chase, to play, the pure golden impulse tugged at my heart. But the fear was stronger. Max had loved tennis balls. Max had played on that rug. If I touched that ball, I would be stepping into Max's life, into his history. And what if I wasn't good enough? What if my chase wasn't as joyful, my catch not as elegant? What if my presence just highlighted his absence? I remembered the shadowy shadow I had seen outside the shelter fence the night before, Max's morning presence. I felt his presence here too, not as a threat, but as a silent, judging expectation. A golden should be happy. A golden should play. A golden should be a sunshine dog. But I was not just a golden. I was a golden from Kennel 7, a repository of fear. Mom then came closer, moving slowly, deliberately. She avoided eye contact, a kindness to a trauma dog. She knelt by the uneaten food bowl. She didn't push it closer. She didn't scold. She just reached out and placed a small, dark object next to the bowl. It was a fragment of my past, a small, threadbare piece of blanket, smelling faintly of the old shelter disinfectant, but also of my own anxious scent from the journey. And then she spoke, her voice still low, but this time directly to me. "Goldie," she whispered, her voice rough, but this time directly to me. "Goldie, this is your peace corner. This is your safe thing. When you're ready, you eat. No rush. We'll be right here." It was a profound concession. They recognized my need for an anchor, my need to bring the painful familiarity of the past into the overwhelming newness of the present. By validating my old, meager comfort object, they validated my fear. They were saying, "We see your history, and we don't demand you erase it." I took a shaky step, nudging the small blanket fragment with my nose. It smelled of my previous pain, but next to the food, it smelled like an unexpected permission. The safety wasn't in the house. The safety was in their quiet, unwavering presence. Their understanding that trust is built drop by agonizing drop. It was the moment I realized they weren't trying to replace Max. They were trying to rescue me.
If you believe that the quiet acts of kindness are the most profound, and if Goldie's slow journey towards trust resonates with your own struggles, please share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of gentle patience. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next step in Goldie's life timeline. I finally ate. It wasn't a feast, it was a quiet, necessary act. My small, anxious blanket was the psychological barrier I needed. With that familiar, comforting smell next to me, the fear that the food would be snatched away or that the door would suddenly open to send me back to Kennel 7 slightly receded. The humans went about their day, moving slowly, always within sight, but never pressuring. They were masters of gentle coexistence. As the afternoon wore on, and the light outside turned that deep orange that only promises a long, quiet night, the inevitable happened. The backyard. Dad clipped the leash onto my collar and led me toward the glass door. The yard was another territory, a vast, complex map of scents and memories. As we stepped out, I was hit by a wave of Max. The scent was richer, fresher here. Dog sweat, cut grass, the specific soil where he had surely dug, and the ghost of his happy barks clinging to the air. The most powerful scent came from a corner where a large, beautifully worn dog bed lay under a small oak tree. It was his throne.
I pulled back, whimpering softly. My instinct screamed, "Do not trespass." My body was willing to accept the house's silent truth, but the yard was the sacred temple of Max's boundless energy. I froze. Dad paused, understanding immediately. He didn't force me. He just sat on the steps, letting me be the one in control of the distance. Mom joined him, carrying the book and the small, old blanket fragment I had used as my shield. She sat beside him, their bodies close, a unit of quiet support. Then, Mom took my small, threadbare shelter blanket. I tensed, anticipating its removal, its disappearance, the ultimate signal of the end of my familiar past. But she didn't throw it away. She did the most shocking, the most healing, and the most pivotal thing that has ever happened in my life. She stood up slowly, walked to the oak tree, and picked up the large, worn dog bed. She took the shelter blanket fragment and with profound, almost ritualistic care, placed my tiny, dirty square under Max's beautiful old dog bed. She was grounding my pain beneath his peace. Then she returned to the steps, holding Max's bed. It was large and smelled overpoweringly of Max's life, his final comfortable breaths, his essence. I shrank away, my golden fur bristling with anxiety. Mom sat on the steps and spread Max's blanket next to her feet, creating a comfortable patch. Then she took a pair of scissors from her pocket. The sound of the sharp metal clicking was a shocking noise in the calm air. She cut off a piece of Max's enormous, cherished bed, just a corner, no bigger than a paw print. She did it quickly, decisively, as if performing a necessary sacrifice. The air shifted again. The scent of Max was now sharp with the smell of release. She took the small piece she had cut, the corner of Max's legacy, and walked over to me. I stood frozen. She didn't press the piece onto me. She simply placed the large main blanket of Max's life down, then put the small cut piece of his blanket right next to my corner. It was a tangible gift, a piece of his love separate from his throne. Then Mom looked at the cut corner of Max's blanket and said, her voice catching, "This is for Goldie, Max. You passed the watch."
I realized then that this wasn't about replacement, it was about succession. The fragment of Max's blanket was the family's way of telling me, we want you to carry his light, not forget him, but absorb his strength. His reign is over, but our love for a golden heart continues. You are not invading. You are being invited to guard. My pain, my tiny piece of fear from the shelter, was now the foundation for Max's eternal comfort, and a piece of his comfort was now the foundation for my new life. This journey from fear to the fragile dawn of hope is far from over. If this moment of healing touched your soul, please press the like button and leave a comment telling me what object holds the most emotional significance in your life. And if you want to know how Goldie will honor Max's memory and truly claim her place, make sure you are subscribed and click the notification bell to be part of the final chapter. I walked toward the cut piece of Max's blanket. It was soft, heavier, and smelled intensely of deep comfort and a love that had been perfectly utilized. I nudged it with my nose, absorbing the legacy. It felt like I was putting on a golden armor, woven from the threads of their past and my future. This small, fuzzy square of fabric, bearing the unmistakable scent of a life fully lived, was not just a relic. It was a tangible, woolen promise that this territory, this home, was ready to recognize a new tenant, not by erasing the last, but by honoring his memory through shared space. I looked up. Mom and Dad were still sitting together on the steps. They weren't looking at me with the expectant joy of new owners. They were looking with the quiet, shared pain of people who were bravely choosing hope over despair. Their love for Max was not a weight on me. It was the strongest proof of their capacity to love. They needed me to fill a role, the role of the dog who would receive all the abundant remaining love they had stored up. This wasn't a transaction of goods, it was a transfer of purpose, a deeply moving exchange of empty bowls for overflowing hearts. My own trauma suddenly felt less paralyzing. I realized that my desperate loneliness in Kennel 7 and their devastating loss of Max were two sides of the same terrible coin. We had all been left with a profound, terrifying emptiness. I had been abandoned by a human who chose to leave, and they had been abandoned by a loyal companion who had no choice but to go. Our grief was different in origin, but identical in its aching hollow space. And it was in this shared hollow space that our stories finally intertwined. I reflected on the intricate design of the universe that brings two broken things together to make a new, stronger whole. Humans, with their complicated words and closed-door rituals, often believe that healing means moving past the pain. But we dogs know better. Healing means acknowledging the pain, making space for it, and then inviting a new, quiet love to settle right beside it. That rug, Max's territory, was not a challenge, but a silent shrine, and I was finally ready to be the loyal guardian of its reverence. I took the tiny, monumental step and lay down, not on Max's old bed, but right between the piece of his blanket and my small, familiar piece of shelter rag. I stretched out fully, exposing my belly, an act of supreme vulnerability. It was my silent vow. I see your pain. I trust your hearts. I will be your loyalty, and in return, I will accept your safety. My body, which had been coiled tight for so long, unwound like a watch spring finally released. Every muscle sighed. Every breath deepened. It was the first time my entire being had accepted the word home. The humanist slid off the steps and approached me, slowly, almost reverently. She didn't scratch my head or rub my ears. She lay down beside me, stretching her body parallel to mine, her head resting on her folded arm. She simply existed beside me, accepting the weight of my presence. There was no demand for affection, no request for a lick or a tail wag, just presence. That, I realized, was the purest form of love after abandonment, the gift of unhurried, unconditional presence. The dad came closer too, resting his hand gently on her shoulder, completing the circle of quiet connection. The house, which had been loud with the ghost of Max, finally sighed, a long, deep, cleansing sigh. I could feel the tension draining from their shoulders, a palpable surrender to the small, breathing hope lying on their lawn. I lifted my head slightly and nudged the mom's hand, a tentative, gentle gesture, not a demand, but an offering. The soft skin of her palm against my snout felt like the final click of the door, locking in the safety. It was here, on the damp earth of the yard that had known Max's joy and the human's deepest sorrow, that the three of us formed our unspoken pact. I was not replacing a soul. I was entering a covenant of healing. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since my old life ended, I didn't feel the need to keep watch. I didn't fear the closing door, because I knew this time the shoes would stay. The sound of their breathing, syncopated, alive, and utterly committed, was the most beautiful, complex music I had ever heard. Max's essence was not erased. It was woven into the fabric of this new piece. I was not a replacement. I was the continuation of a golden heart's story. I understood then that loss, even the most crushing kind, is not a finality. It is a transformation. It turns the love that was meant for one into a fierce capacity to love another. Their grief for Max was the very bridge that allowed them to connect with my fear. They knew what it felt like to have a hole in their pack, and I knew what it felt like to be the piece missing from the puzzle. In this profound moment of shared vulnerability,
All the complicated steps, the nervous eating, the avoidance of the rug, all melted away. Only the simple, breathtaking fact of us remained. I would teach them to laugh again, and they would teach me that some bonds are truly unbreakable. The life Max had shown them, a life of unreserved golden loyalty, was now the blueprint for my own service. I was committed to honoring the space he left by filling it with the light of a rescued soul. The truth I learned that first day in my new home is this: purpose is not found in forgetting the pain, but in sharing the space it left behind. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom in your own loneliness to meet another soul who has hit rock bottom in their loss. The most beautiful bonds are not formed in perfect joy, but in the shared, brave commitment to healing the mutual wound. Your deepest scars often hold the map to someone else's desperate need for comfort. Never be afraid of the empty spaces in your life. They are merely the invitation for something profound to enter and grow. I found my forever home not when they chose me, but when they made space for my brokenness next to the memory of their own loss. If this story has reminded you that your own wounds can be a source of strength for others, if you believe in the magic of second chances and the power of inherited light, please don't let the story end here. Give this video your most heartfelt like, share it with one person who is struggling with a loss right now, and tell me in the comments, what is the golden lesson you learned from today's chapter? And for all the future stories, for every moment of Goldie's life timeline from now on, make sure you are subscribed to Tales of a Golden Heart, because the journey is always better when we walk together.